Hello and welcome back, my fellow Lovecraftians. Today we are halfway through the macabre stories of H.P. Lovecraft. For this one, we'll be reading the tale of the terrible old man. Feel free to leave in the comments any terrible old men you know. Let's begin. It was the design of Angelo Ricci and Joe Zenzek and Manuel Silva to call on the terrible old man. This old man dwells all alone in a very ancient house on Water Street, near the sea. It is reputed to be both exceedingly rich and exceedingly feeble, which forms a situation very attractive to men of the profession of the Messrs. Ricci, Kazak, and Sylvia, for that profession was nothing less dignified than robbery. The inhabitants of Kingsport say that many things about the terrible old man which generally keep him safe from the attention of gentlemen like Mr. Ricci and his colleagues, despite the almost certain fact that he hides a fortune of indefinite magnitude somewhere about his musty and variable abode. He is, in truth, a very strange person, believed to have been a captain of the East India clipper ships in his day, so old that no one can remember when he was young, and so taciturn that few know his real name. Among the gnarled trees in the front yard of his aged and neglected place, he maintained a strange collection of large stones, oddly grouped and painted so that they resemble the idols in some obscure Eastern temple. This collection frightens away most of the small boys who love to taunt the terrible old man about his long white hair and beard, or to break a small pane window of his dwelling with wicked missiles. But there are other things which frighten the older and more curious folk, who sometimes steal up to the house to peer in through the dusty panes. These folks say that on a table, in each small piece of lead suspended pendulum-wise from a string, and they say that the terrible man talks to these bottles, addressing them by names as Jack, Scarface, Long Tom, Spanish Joe, Peters, and Mate Elis, and that whenever he speaks to a bottle, the little lead pendulum which makes certain definite vibrations, as if it is an answer. Those who has watched the tall, lean, terrible old man with those peculiar conversations do not watch him again. But Angelo Ricci and Joe Sadstrack and new heterogeneous Mr. Salva, and not of Kingsport's blood, they were of that of an alien stock which lies outside the charmed circles of New England life and traditions, and they saw in the terrible old man merely a tottering, almost helpless graybeard who could not walk without the aid of a knotted cane, and whose thin, weak hands shook pitifully. They were really quite sorry in their way for the lonely, unpopular old fellow, whom everybody shunned, and at whom all the dogs barked singularly. But business is business, and to a robber whose soul is in the profession, there is a lure and a challenge about a very old and very feeble man who has no account at the bank, and who pays for his few necessities at the village store with Spanish gold and silver minted 2 centuries ago. Messer Ricci, Sarsnack, and Silver selected the night of April 11th for their call. Mr. Ricci and Mr. Silva were to interview the poor old gentleman, while Mr. Savak waited for them in their pursual metallic burden with a covered motor car in Ship Street, by the gate in the tall rear wall of their host grounds, desired to avoid needlessly expectations in case of unexpected police intrusions prompted these plans for quite an unsought departure. As prearranged, the 3 adventurers started out separately in order to prevent any evil-minded suspicions afterwards. Mr. Ricci and Silva met in Water Street by the old man's front gate, and although they did not like the way the moon shone down upon the painted stones, though the building branches of the gnarled trees, they had more important things to think about than more idle superstitions. They feared it might be unpleasant work, making the terrible old man loquaciously concerned about his hoarded gold and silver, for aged sea captains are notably stubborn and persevere. Still, he was very old and very feeble, and there were 2 visitors. Messer Ricci and Silver were experienced in the art of making unwilling persons voluble, and the screams of a weak and exceptionally vulnerable old man can be easily muffled. So they moved up to the one-lighted window and heard the terrible old man talking childishly to his bottles with pendulums. Then they donned masks and knocked politely at the weather-stained oaken doors. Waiting seemed very long to Mr. Sasnak as he fidgeted restlessly in the covered motor car by the terrible old man's back gate in Ship Street. He was more than ordinarily tender-hearted, and he did not like the hideous screams he had heard in the ancient house just after the hour appointed for the deed. Had he not told his colleagues to be as gentle as possible with the pathetic old sea captain? Very nervously he watched the narrow oaken gate and the high and ivy-clad stone walls. Frequently he consulted his watch and wondered at the delay. Had the old man died before revealing where his treasures was hidden? And had a thorough search become necessary? Mr. Salzbach did not like to wait so long in the dark in such a terrible place. And then he sensed a soft tread or tapping on the walk inside the gate, heard a gentle fumbling at the rusty latch, and saw the narrow, heavy door swing inwards. And in the pallid glow of the single dim street lamp, he strained his eyes to see what his colleagues had brought out of the sinister house which loomed so close behind them. But when he looked, he did not see what he expected, for his colleagues were not there at all, but only the terrible old man, leaning quietly on his knotted cane and smiling hideously. Mr. Sasnak had never before noticed the color of the man's eyes. Now he saw they were yellow. Little things make considerable excitement in this little town, which is the reason the Kingsport people talked all that spring and summer about 3 unidentified bodies, horribly slashed out with many cutlasses and horribly mangled by the tread of many cruel boot heels, which the tide washed in, and some people even spoke of things as trivial as a deserted motor car found in Ship Street, or certainly, especially, inhuman cries, probably of a stray animal or migratory bird, heard in the night by wakeful citizens. But in this idle village, gossip, the terrible old man, took no interest in it at all. He was by nature reserved, and when one is aged and feeble, one's reserve is doubly strong. Besides, so the ancient sea captain must have witnesses scores of things much more stirring in the far-off days of his unremembered youth. Such concludes the story of the terrible old man. Honestly, I was expecting him to be the one that would be weak and be the vulnerable prey in this story. I wasn't expecting him to be a demon sea captain with his own horrors hiding in his house. I wish that we could have expanded on why he was talking to his bottles, like they might have been old friends, or why he had those yellow demon eyes. Was he perhaps possessed? Or worse, was there more going on? Was his great treasure just eldritch horrors holded beyond the doors of imagination? Or perhaps was he just the sea captain who beat Cthulhu? Who knows? That's what I love about these stories. There's so much to unpack. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and leave your theories down below. Until next time, my Lovecraftians, bye-bye.